Hi, everybody. Welcome to Capital to the Coast BNI. My name is Mike Manning. Each week, we bring you a local small business success story from one of our 40 plus chapters that cover the area from Raleigh, Durham, we call the Triangle, all the way to Wilmington and the coast. If you are not familiar with BNI, it is Business Networking International, the world's largest networking organization. And each week, our fellow members get together, and our goal is to help each other grow their business because one of the lines in BNI is givers gain. We know if we give, we will gain. And our local small business success story this week is Bravin Troy with AFLAC. Bravin's a member of RD16, named Research Triangle Professionals. They meet Friday mornings at 9 a.m. at the North Carolina Wesleyan campus on Miami Boulevard in Durham. And Bravin is the mentor coordinator in the chapter. Bravin, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Mike. Thank you for asking.
Oh, glad to have you on the show. All right, two questions first. We'll get to this is the most important stuff, of course. We'll get to the business later. So, one thing I'm intrigued by, one thing I'm jealous of. So, let's start with my intrigue thing is tell me the story of your name. I don't believe before I met you I'd ever heard that name before.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know it's not a very common name, Bravin. It actually is just made up. My father made it up. Before he even knew that he was going to have me before he met my mom. I believe he was in high school at the time, and he really liked the name Brandon, but he didn't want to give his first son a common name or that
Mm.
common of a name. So it was derived from Brandon. He just played with it until it sounded like something he liked. And I think Bravin is a pretty nice name.
Yep.
I'm really happy with it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Nothing against people named Brandon, but you don't look like a Brandon. You look more like a Bravin, right? So the thing I'm jealous of, you have just a little bit more hair than I do.
Yes.
I don't know so when I was your age, when I tried to grow my hair, it looked like a chia pet. It just grew out. It never grew long, and so it was just not a good idea for me to think of any kind of hairstyle. How when did you first start growing your hair longer?
It's always funny when people ask me about my hair because if you look at any pictures, yeah, I started growing it out just as I was coming out of high school. And before that, for pretty much my entire childhood, all the way through high school, I actually had a buzz cut. I always buzzed my
Oh,
hair. I thought it would be, it was more trouble than it was worth to grow it out or anything like that. And I was like, it's easy to keep up with when it's that short. And one day I just decided, I have never really thought about what I'd look like with long hair, and I kind of want to try it. And if I ever don't like it, I can cut it off.
hmm.
And the longer it's gotten, the more I've liked it, and I really like the length that it's at now.
Can
Yeah,
it
I'm very lucky to have my hair.
can it get too long?
I don't know. If it ever does, I'll cut it, but that hasn't happened yet.
Oh, when was the last time you cut it?
I actually, I get it trimmed pretty regularly. I was really bad at taking care of it at first, and realized if you don't get it cut regularly, you'll get really bad split ends,
Oh,
and dry ends. So I actually get it. I have a stylist I go to pretty regularly to make sure it stays healthy.
all right. Nice, man. Nice calling card for
Yeah.
those of us who could never grow it. Like I don't know if I'd wear it as long as you, but the shoulder length I like.
Hmm.
I like that. So, but anyways, so we're going to talk about a number of things with Bravin today. Not only Aflac but BNI. He is a self-nerd, massive nerd, not a nerd. His words, a massive nerd. So we're going to get to that. Uh, so Aflac is supplemental insurance. And I've learned a number of things in BNI. And one of those was, oh, that's what supplemental insurance kind of is. We think we might know, but I don't think we really know what kind of value you can bring to one of your clients. So fill us in on supplemental insurance.
Yeah. So supplemental insurance is really a broad term, but the simplest way to understand it, I think that sometimes a more effective word to use is to call it gap insurance, because we like to say in the industry that with the products we bring in with Aflac, we're filling in a gap. And what that gap is when a medical event happens, someone gets hurt, someone has a heart attack, someone gets diagnosed with cancer, there's going to be medical treatment that's going to be happening. People, especially in the US, are very concerned about, hey, there's this big medical bill that's going to be coming from that. I want to make sure I have insurance or something that helps me pay for that. But oftentimes, the immediate concern that comes with those events isn't that medical bill, because that can come months down the road before that's due. What usually comes up first is hey, this happened, now I'm not working, now I'm not bringing in money. If you rely on your own income to pay your rent and bring in groceries, and especially if you have a family and you're the breadwinner for that family, that's a huge gap. And supplemental insurance is meant to protect you from that gap. It pays cash so that way you can pay your bills when that happens, so you can still put food on the table, so you can still keep the roof over your head. Um, and it's really tragic when people get into situations where they're falling behind because something happened and now they can't pay their rent because they haven't gone to work in a week, 2 weeks. When they start missing those paychecks, it's very easy to fall behind.
Yeah, and I've learned a number of things through BNI, and one of those is going because so we're all experts at things we don't kind of know about, like household fixes and things like that. Like, oh yeah, I can figure that out. But there's just some things we got to go to an expert for, and to understand this and then apply it. I think it's a great point you mentioned that we don't even think about, oh, how am I going to cover my bills? Because we know we're going to have an insurance bill. So I imagine some of the first conversations you have with people and they figure out what all is available to them. It's kind of a game changer, isn't it?
Hmm. Yeah. It always starts with education because most people don't know or understand what these products are. But I've seen even in the short career I've had so far with AFLAC, I've seen when it's been able to help people for small things, for big things, and it really makes a difference. Um, and that's really great to see, because when I first started, there's all these stories and everything that I was told that I was able to tell people about to actually have those myself and to actually see that I've made a difference and help people is really powerful.
Yeah, my wife is a state of North Carolina employee, and that's one of the things she is offered through her work is Aflac insurance. And I mean, it took us no time to say,
Hmm.
where do we sign? Because it's just the planning process. Granted, it's there for a reason, and it's hugely important when it does show up. But until it shows up or you need it, it's part of the planning that I wish folks would kind of look at everything available to them. And so if they have, do you get this question with people? Already have insurance at work.
Yeah, that's a very common kind of objection that I get is people say, "Hey, I already have insurance." Especially being in the triangle, there's a ton of people working in the medical field, and I oftentimes am not working with the people in the medical field, but I'm working with their spouses, and they'll say, "Hey, my husband or wife or spouse, they work at Duke or they work at UNC, so we actually have really, really nice insurance." And while that is often true because they do get really nice insurance through there, a lot of times they don't have that supplemental. They don't have something to kind of fill that gap. Um, and if that spouse, who's probably making good money at UNC or Duke, ends up in a situation where that paycheck's not coming in, then we get into trouble.
And it's just the planning part of it. So that's what I like about it very
Hmm.
much. So I know it's just a couple things I'm aware of. Obviously, the cancer insurance is what I knew from the beginning. And both my parents passed from cancer, so I, you know, figure we need that. But accident insurance, I think is it critical illness insurance?
Yes,
But I know
critical
there's
illness. Yes.
there's just a number of things that I know you can not sell to people, but make it available to them.
Yeah. So one of the great things when I'm working with a small business is that we can have up to like a dozen different products that we're offering. Um, and which I always think is great because everyone's situation is different when it comes to the line of work that they're in, or their family, or their income, or and their expenses, and also thinking about things like, hey, what kind of things are you worried about when it comes to risk? When we're talking about that planning, maybe there's certain things that your family has history of as far as medical events go, like maybe your family has a history of heart disease or your family has a history of cancer, and so we have specific products that can help to protect if they have those concerns. So it's really great because we can kind of lay everything out on the table and say, hey, we're building something that is built for you. So we're putting in a plan that is specific to your situation and your concerns, rather than just saying, hey, we have a one size fits all that we're going to slap on everyone.
Yeah, and I like the small business aspect of it because in BNI, it's basically everybody is in a usually is in a small business. Some people work for bigger
Mhm.
national companies like you, which is fine. But I still consider you small business because you're still trying to grow Bravin's book of business. So
Yeah.
you're in fact small business. And we a lot of times as business owners, we don't look at, hey, what could help attract future employees or retain current employees. And I bet you get a lot of good feedback on what AFLAC can offer.
Oh yeah, that's typically one of on the small business side. That's typically one of the main pain points we address is turnover and attracting good employees. And one of my favorite stories I like to share. One of my first clients I ever had was a residential cleaning company, and the owner was telling me that she was currently at 5 or 6 employees. She said she used to be over 10, and she had the business to justify having that many employees, but she just couldn't find anyone that would work for her that she could really count on. When we were setting up her AFLAC account, before we even finished enrollment, she already had 2 new employees that were being onboarded. Um, which it's crazy how much of a difference it can make when you're doing those interviews or you're putting out those adverts for the position. You're saying, yes, I have benefits, just like the big companies. I have benefits that I can offer that'll help you with health situations.
Do you talk to small business owners? Do they get to the point where they match whatever the employee or puts in there, or will they cover it themselves?
A lot of them do, not all of them do. I think that a business is providing really good value either way, because even if an employer isn't matching, you're still giving them access to some exclusive products at some more favorable rates. But I mean, I know there are actually that same client I was just talking about, that cleaning company. One of the things they do is they say, hey, once you have a year of tenure with me, I will give you $10 a week, and that $10 a week is enough for any employee to get almost any product completely paid for.
Nice. Yeah.
Hmm.
But it's those little things, though, and especially in today's market, if you talk to most small business owners, they'll tell you, yeah, it's tough to find people. And the last thing you want to do is have to keep finding people. I mean, turnover's a bear to a business. Just
Yeah,
spending all that time and money. Ugh. Yeah. So little things
it
like that.
is. Yeah, and when you do all of the math and everything together, I don't remember the exact number, but I've seen metrics that say like when you have turnover, usually that costs the business somewhere between like I think it's like somewhere in the realm of 3 or 6 months
Mhm.
of that employee's pay that you're losing to your business,
Oh, yeah.
because it takes a lot of resources to hire and it takes a lot of resources to train, and new employees are initially less productive than more tenured employees. So it yeah.
No, I like that. With the insurance people I've met through BNI, they give different answers as to how they got into the insurance world. How did you get into the AFLAC world?
Yeah, I was already in sales. When I had gotten out of college, I was interested in trying sales. I thought I would have a knack for it. So I was like, I want to give this a shot. And I really like the idea of being independent. So I first started doing gig work. There are companies out there that they just need someone to hold the table for a weekend, or sometimes a week. Or the longest one I did was a sales job where I did, and it was 2 months long. That was one of the longer ones. But the catch with gig work, it pays well, but you're always having to look for the next thing, and it
Mm.
can get kind of exhausting, kind of always being in the market for looking for work. And when I was looking for a new gig, I just happened on to AFLAC. And initially, I was like, I'm going to hear them out, but I don't think insurance is something I want to
Mm.
do. But I'm willing to hear, I was willing to hear out just about anyone, because you never know what you're going to come across. And I did all of the interviews, and they sent me an offer to work with them. And even then, I was on the fence, but I talked with some family and some friends, and I ended up deciding to go with it. And what really sold me on it, if it were any other insurance company, I probably wouldn't have done it. But what really sold me on it was I get to work with small businesses, which is a
Mm.
really big passion of mine. And I'm glad that I ended up going forward with them because I've really enjoyed it.
So small business owners get drop bys, they get people trying to schedule an appointment, they get people leaving flyers, they get all barraged with information because I've had a couple of businesses where I was the one cold calling them and dropping by. Oh, I was in the neighborhood here. Can you do this? What have you found from a business standpoint is your best way into a business to connect, just to get the interview or the meeting?
Yeah, so I've done it all. I've done the cold calling, I've walked indoors, I've passed out flyers, I've done mail campaigns, even things like that. I do all kinds of networking. Of course, BNI. I mean, I think regardless of what industry you're in, your best way into the door is always a referral. Like,
Mm.
there's nothing better that you can get than to have someone that person trusts say, "Hey, maybe you should talk to this person, hear them out. They might have something that can really help out your business." That familiarity and that level of trust to kind of have it creates like a great baseline to get into the door, and to get that initial meeting, and it we'll have a greater chance of success with the meeting as well.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody new to BNI a couple weeks ago, and we are talking about that very thing, and I was explaining to them how to understand this better. Is her competitors were trying, like a lot of us when we first started out, trying to bull rush the front door. And so we're looking for that side door entrance, which is the referral. So that person knows you're coming and your competitors are still knocking on the front door, leaving flyers. So I would imagine that was probably one of your draws to get into BNI.
Oh yeah. I got into BNI very early in my AFLAC career, and I'm glad that I did, because it when I was being trained, it was kind of pounded into me that, hey, there's all of these different things you can do to try and get a client, and these are the success rates for setting appointments. You got to make 1 to 200 cold calls to set one appointment, or you got to walk into 25 or 50 doors to set an appointment. But if you get three people to give you a referral, the chances are you'll get an appointment out of that. And like I said, it'll be more likely to close. So it's like it's almost a no-brainer to say, like, hey, yeah, let's you need to work the system at least to an extent. You need to build good relationships, so that way people trust you to refer to you, because you're just going to make more money and have more success with
Mm.
much less effort.
I would imagine there's some industries where people hear what you do and they're like, "Oh." I would imagine you when they A, you're in insurance, B, you're with AFLAC, which brings it another very recognizable, but brings another like, "Oh, yeah, I've had I imagine you get some really classic looks or lines, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think there are pros and cons to working with a company with such a big
Mm,
reputation, and then of course, the reputation of insurance as a whole.
mm,
But I think that at the end of the day, the brand recognition of Aflac, the pros outweigh the cons there, because sometimes I do get those kind of weird looks or questions, and I've been really pleasantly surprised. Sometimes people get very excited about
mhm.
Aflac, and sometimes people are very enthusiastic about it, and that always makes me happy to see that people kind of understand that value, and that they think that they see Aflac as a good company, because I truly believe it is.
And I like that because it usually leads to a conversation, which is the number one goal.
Yes. Yeah. It's always to start that conversation, because, like I said earlier, I always lead with education, and I'm always happy whenever people are excited to learn more, or to just see, like, hey, what's the newest thing that Aflac's got to offer to me.
And they probably wanna do sound effects from the Aflac commercials to you, right?
Yeah, I do. Sometimes when I bring it up, sometimes people will just look at me and they'll just Aflac,
Yeah. Yeah.
right from the commercial. Of course, I mean, I've got so many ducks that you can squeeze that will
Yes.
say it too, and people love that.
Yeah, but it's memorable, right?
It is.
It's sometimes better than that, refrigerator magnet. Because
Hmm.
if your kid or you leave it on the counter and at least once a week when you walk by it, you're gonna squeeze it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you just have to, so, uh, you've been doing this, coming up on almost 2 years.
Mhm,
Uh, what is a now that you kinda know what you know,
mhm.
what is a normal work week like for you? Where do you go? How do you get conversation started, to grow your book of business?
Yeah. It's it's hard to say. This career has never felt very normal. But there are some things that are pretty consistent. I still being coming up on 2 years, I still see myself very new. I think that this industry, it takes a very long time to get fully established, so I still do a lot of the things that people like to drop off after their first couple of months. I'm still calling on people, I'm still walking into doors, building those clients. And also, a really big thing for me is maintaining the relationships with the clients that I've earned and won in the past year and some months. And so, it's usually at least, once, maybe multiple times a week, I have an existing client that I'm reaching out to and saying, like, hey, I'm just checking in. You're still maybe a few months due for open enrollment, or,
Mhm.
open enrollment's coming up and we need to start planning for it. But I want to make sure that everyone that I work with, I at least make an attempt that they see my face or hear my voice at least once a quarter, because sometimes, oftentimes people have changes in their business. They have employees that are hired, or employees that have left, or there are employees that have filed claims. And as much as I always ask, like, hey, please reach out to me if you have one of those changes and you need help, people don't always do that. But if I can make myself present, a lot more likely that I can do that. And that's really where the good service comes in, is when I'm very easy to access. Um, but I mean, it's a mix of everything. It's seeing new faces and old faces and following up, and lots of networking. I've built so much of my business off of
Mhm.
networking, especially off of BNI. Most weeks I'm visiting at least one chapter outside of my home chapter. So that is a very big. There's usually at least one on my calendar a week that I'm going to be visiting, or I'm subbing for someone or something like that. And then, of course, my own chapter, which I'm
Yep.
at every week as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's smart. I was just doing a list of we've got a couple of core groups um, that are getting started, and I always try to provide a list of companies that have more than 2 employees
Mhm.
in Triangle or Coastal BNI, just to say, hey, these companies kind of get BNI, so may as well start with them. And we've got a number of them that have been on the show, and AFLAC's creeping up there. I was doing a report over the weekend, and we now have 5 AFLAC agents in the Triangle region, so I know that's growing. So you compete against, all right, so let's go back. We'll come back to that.
Mhm.
We are now in the middle of open enrollment.
Open enrollment is creeping up.
Okay.
It starts at the beginning of November.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And that means what to who?
So open enrollment, we're talking about open enrollment, which isn't something that I deal with directly, but obviously it's very relevant. We're talking about the opportunity for people to enroll in marketplace insurance, which is insurance that people can get where they don't have to worry about like medical history or things like that in
Mhm.
order to qualify. And sometimes they are able to find options that make a lot more sense or are more affordable than private insurance. So, I see it as a really good tool for people that aren't working somewhere where major medical insurance is being offered. That traditional, we think of like Blue Cross Blue Shield or companies like that, where that's not being offered. Then marketplace can be a really, really great tool, because it's very, very rare that someone's in a situation where it's like, yeah, you don't need medical insurance. It's something that just about everyone needs.
And if it's not open enrollment, you can see if I get this right. If you
Mhm.
change jobs, let's say change jobs in June,
Mhm.
could you and your new company didn't have what the old company did or however it works out, could I still buy your insurance, or is it better to do it when November starts in open enrollment?
Yeah. So you can always make, with supplemental insurance, a lot of the rules are the same as with traditional major medical. When there are life changes, such as switching a job or a change in marriage status, or there's a new kid in the family, things like that, or even a change of address, can trigger, hey, we're going to have opportunities where we can make changes outside of open enrollment. But when it comes to supplemental insurance, the open enrollment time is actually tied to the business. It's usually around when the account was established with the business. So it's not always necessarily November. I have companies that have open enrollment every month out of the year because it's when it was established or we had moved it or things like that. But there are lots of opportunities for people to make changes, and And there are also some supplemental products that don't have to abide by the rules of open enrollment as well. Um, so something like short-term disability is a very popular product, and that's something that, the way that it works and it's regulated on the tax side, it isn't typically bound by open enrollment, which means if someone wants to make a change to their short-term disability policy, they can do that any time of the year.
And before we came on the air, you and Amnon were talking that. So fill us in on the connection with Medicare, Medicaid, and people that are older than me, like Amnon. Actually, I'm there in 6 months. So I can't really talk anymore. I'm in that category of, hey, once you turn 64, you need to start planning, which I have. So
Mhm.
how do you guys interact with Medicare and Medicaid and folks on that?
Yeah, so again, this comes into everyone's situation is different, so it really depends. But there are some things like when we're talking about getting into that territory, usually the conversation is also including talking about retirement and some products like short-term disability, which is, a direct protection of one's income. If you're retiring and not having that income anymore, then it doesn't make sense to keep a short-term disability policy. But if we're talking something about something like cancer, a cancer insurance policy with AFLAC, as long as you keep that, you're guaranteed to be able to keep that for as long as you live. And cancer can happen to anyone at any age, but I think we all know the older you get, the more likely it is to happen. So something like that can be really important to keep, even if you have, the protection of Medicare or Medicaid, or Social Security or other, of those kind of retirement age benefits. A cancer policy can still make a huge, huge difference.
Agreed.
Mhm.
So let me ask you a personal question then. All right. So
Sure.
I've been for the last 7.5 years, I've been in the greatest club ever, which is the grandparent club. It
Hmm.
beats any other club I've ever joined. Okay. My boys tell me I had nothing to do with it, but I kind of did, and I let them have their moment. So what can grandparents do for our young grandkids?
Actually, that's really interesting you bring that up. One of the luckiest things I think I had, and I actually got this from my grandfather. When I was 3 years old, my grandfather got a juvenile life insurance policy for me. And having it since I was three, and it continues to mature. The policy that I had, it was with Gerber. The face value of it doubled when I turned 18, and it was also building cash value because this was a whole life policy. And it was this really, really great tool I had kind of going into college and going into adulthood because one, you never know what's going to happen in adolescence, and although most kids tend to be very, very healthy, something could happen, and anything that happens medically can make it more difficult or more expensive to get life insurance, which is always very frustrating. It's like the one type of insurance that just about everyone needs.
Mm.
It's the one that we can all but guarantee that it's going to pay out for you because everyone's going to die. But when you have something happen to you very young that said, insurance companies like, well, we're not going to insure you, that can be super frustrating. But a juvenile policy can protect someone against that. It protected me. And I also have the option of, hey, maybe I am healthy. Maybe I still have other options for health insurance. Now I've got this policy that has built up a bunch of cash value. I can pull that out and use that to help to pay for college or help to start a business, or just have it as a cushion in case anything crazy ever happens to me and my savings have run dry and I don't have anything else. So now I have this life insurance policy that I can pull money out of. So it's a very effective tool. And for juvenile life insurance, kids are typically seen pretty low risk, so those policies are very, very affordable.
All right. I learned something today,
Mhm.
which is why I like doing this show every week.
Yeah,
Do you remember your first client that closed business with you?
I do. Yes. It was my first ever client. Was interestingly enough a massage therapist, which is not even an industry that I work with that commonly. Um, but there are, I've run into a lot of businesses out there where the business is actually a bunch of people that are working independently, but sharing an office space. So they kind of have like an
Mm.
overhead. A lot of salons work that way as well. For massage therapists, is pretty common, and some other businesses. And when you're independent, it is super difficult, and insurance can be very challenging. But when you have that, kind of overhead company saying, "Hey, we're independent, but we're all working through this company, and so we're all sharing this space and working together for this purpose," that gives the opportunity for us to bring in, "Hey, this business that exists here, you guys are all working under it, and now we can provide some more options, and you're going to get some more favorable things." So, and honestly, they're still such a great client that I've worked with. Very very easy to work with, and they were very accepting. And some of those massage therapists were some of those people, like I mentioned before, that were actually very excited about AFLAC, which is always very cool to see.
And then they probably told 1 or 2 friends who called you, and that's what makes an ideal client, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. They, I love when a client thinks about me in that way. I think a lot of people say it across many industries when it comes to this kind of service, when it comes to sales. But the best kind of thank you, or the best gratitude I can get from
Mm,
someone is a referral.
yeah.
It's an amazing thing to get, to say that you trust me enough and you think I did a good enough job that you would send me to someone else that you trust.
Yep, I agree. I agree.
Hmm.
It's the beauty of BNI. Now we've known each other a little bit. I do
Hmm.
very much appreciate your sense of humor. Let me say that. So I would assume when you have a family member or really close friend complaining about, oh, this aches and that aches, you just kind of look at them with, wonder who could help you with that.
Yeah.
You ever have a chance to remind them of what you do?
Oh yeah. I mean, it comes up. I I mean, I've been able to do some things for my family that have been really nice. Like one of the things that I've talked about, like my mom is a teacher, and she's in Ohio, and in Ohio, the schools there, she gets really good benefits and things like that. And I've actually had conversations with her, because I was like, hey, and then this is something I've offered to a lot of people, is like, hey, sometimes when you're working somewhere and you have all these benefits, a lot of places and a lot of companies aren't having someone come in that is actually going through and explaining how all of this works. And there can be a lot of products, and it can be confusing. And sometimes you're just checking boxes because you think it's what's right, but people don't always understand what they have or how it works. And I've offered to my friends and family and just said, like, hey, if you ever just want me to sit down with you and go through what you have, like, I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I think that everyone should at least know what they have. And that way, if the situation ever comes up, you're not surprised that, oh, I wasn't covered for this situation, or this plan didn't work how I expected, or I don't know how to use this in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just we don't know what we don't know, and just somebody to explain, "Hey, here's an option for you. Don't sell me."
Yeah.
Just tell me, "Hey, here's something to think about." And that's again, that's why I think you're going to be successful at what you do, because you truly do want to sit down and help them.
Hmm.
Was your mom did she teach at the school you went to when you were growing up?
No, actually, her teaching is kind of a more recent thing. While I was growing up, she was a waitress for pretty much my entire life. Um, it was, when I was going through like high school, it was me, my three sisters, and her, and she was raising us alone while working full time at the restaurant, and also taking online classes on the side to get
Yeah.
her degree and to get her certification to teach.
Moms are awesome, aren't they?
Yeah, which is a really incredible thing to be like, wow, you were raising three kids on your own, supporting us and the whole household. She was the only one bringing in money and putting food on the table, and she was taking classes at night, and managed to finish her education. And she always wanted to teach, but it's a lot of work to get there, and she had a lot of responsibility, but she did it, and she's very happy with it.
I've said for years, moms are the strongest people on the planet. I don't care where they live and what their age is, but they put up with enough stuff, and yeah, so they're
I
strongest
absolutely
people.
agree.
Yep. All right, so you've not been in AFLAC that long,
Right.
but what do you know today that you wish you knew on day one as far as building relationships, growing a book of business, anything like that?
I think one of the biggest things I've learned is, I think in sales, I mean, it's happened to me and I've seen it happen to so many other people, is we freeze up and we have this hesitation of, what if I won't know the right thing to say? What if I I'm going to mess up, or I don't know the products enough, or I don't know the company enough. I don't know enough statistics and things like that. But really, I think sales and insurance and anything else, it's a numbers game. And yes, there is a lot to learn and a lot of things to get better at on that front. But the way that you're going to learn is by getting out there and making mistakes and running into people that ask questions you don't know the answers to, and then you have to later go figure out what the answer is. Um, so I think the biggest thing, if I could go back to the beginning, the biggest thing that I would just tell myself is like, hey, get out of the office, get out of the house, just go out and talk to people and try to talk to as many people as you can because that's how you're going to find clients. And I think I've seen there are clients that I've gotten that I felt like when I talked to them I messed up or I didn't say the right thing at first or things like that. And sometimes that's okay, and you can still do business that way, and you'll get better as time comes. But it's okay to mess up.
With all the things you do every week,
Mhm.
networking, posting on social media, doing a seminar, I mean, all of that stuff that you do,
Mhm.
how do you know you've had a good week business wise?
Yeah, I think it's very important to track how you're doing. Actually have like data that you can use. I have a system I use where I can track how many people I've talked to, how many actual like decision makers, the people that I could actually close an account with I've talked to, how many appointments I've set. um, so really when it comes to how well my week has gone or whether I think I've done well in a week, it really comes down to, hey, at the beginning of the week when I said this is what I want to do this week, did I meet that goal? I think it's very important to have a very easy to understand, a very achievable goal, one that is very clear. It's saying, hey, this week I want to set 5 appointments. Come the end of day Friday, that's a very easy thing to comprehend. Did I meet that goal? Did I hit those 5 appointments? And if I didn't, what could I have done differently to try and get there?
And I know early on in business for all of us, it took a while usually to understand your closing rate.
Mhm.
And are you starting to get a better sense of, okay, if I have this many quality conversations, I'm probably going to get this many clients?
Yes, yeah. And that's something too. And I think the training I've gotten with AFLAC has given me a lot of great resources because that same system I use to track, I can pull that information and I can run a report and I can say, hey, out of all the appointments I've run this year, how many of them ended up closing into an account? And then I can, calculate my closing rate from there. And they sometimes they tell us too, and I think can be a really powerful thing, is just to say like, hey, you can even break it down to, this is the amount of commission I get from an average client, and then this is how many people I have to talk to or how many appointments I have to run to get a client, and this is how many people I have to talk to set an appointment. And you can break it down and say, hey, now I know I'm making X dollars. It might be I'm making $20 every time I talk to someone,
Mm.
and so I need to just talk to enough people and earn that $20 enough times to close the appointment. And then I know, hey, I made $20 each time, and now it's finally paying out. And how long does it take to talk to someone and earn that $20? And I think that can be a very motivating. I think the brain likes to have that very uh, upfront and obtainable thing because it can be very hard to be motivated when you're in sales and you know that everything has that delayed gratification of, takes a lot of work up front before you get the payoff.
It's very gratifying once you can understand, all right, if I want to make 5,000 a month,
Mhm.
what do, how many whatevers of whatever do I have to do? And once you've been working long enough and you can understand that, yeah, so now it makes, I think it helps you structure your day and your week and your month better. And and let me guess, Bravin, you're a lot more aware of your activities each week based on following those numbers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's a really powerful thing too. Like you said, talking about like planning for the amount of money that you can make. Most careers that isn't an option, but when you're an entrepreneur and you're working for yourself in a lot of different industries, I think that it's amazing and a huge, huge thing to be grateful for, to be able to say, hey, I really want to go on this incredible trip early next year. I want to save some extra money for it. And I know that if I put in a little bit more effort and I work a little bit harder, I can make more money and have that extra money to go on that trip, or to buy that new car or whatever it is that you're looking for. Um, to be able to actually control your income in that way and make more money is really amazing. And it's a lot easier to do when you understand those numbers and you understand your closing rate and all of those things.
And I wish business owners knew their numbers better. And again, we talk about this in BNI training is you got to know where to spend your time and money because we can make more money. But man, when you're spending blocks of time in the wrong places, that sets you behind. But those are one of the things you've learned along the way is okay, not that it's not working, but maybe this isn't the focus for right now or something along those lines.
Yeah. I've actually earlier this year I read a really great book that I think covers a lot of these topics called Fanatical Prospecting. And I am it aligns a lot with what I was trained on, and I think it might have actually been a basis on how I was trained with AFLAC. But it goes a lot into, if you're in sales, you're working for yourself. When you work a normal job, you have an amount of money you make each hour. When you're in sales, that time is a very valuable resource, and you have to decide what you're worth and how much money you're going to make. And if you're going to try and make yourself as valuable as possible, you need to be efficient with your time and make sure you're doing things that are efficient. During what they call the golden hours, which is when businesses are open and when you can actually get in front of your clients. And if you're doing things with your time that aren't very effective, then you're just kind of throwing that time away that you could be doing things that could make you money.
And as business owners, we rarely put a dollar figure. My time is worth 100 an hour, 50 an hour,
Hmm.
whatever it is. We rarely, I'll get to that later. And then all of a sudden later is 10:30 at night. It's like, man, I'm tired. And
Yeah.
you've wasted those prime billable hours.
Yeah. And honestly, I think the most important thing is just to have a plan. The first thing I start every week with, because I'm one of those people that lives by their calendar. If I know, and I've learned doing this, that if it's not on my calendar, it's probably not going to happen. And if I get to Wednesday afternoon and I look and there's nothing on my calendar for Wednesday afternoon, it's not going to be a very productive Wednesday afternoon. So the first thing I do is fill out my calendar and I say, I know this week where I'm going to be
Mm.
for every part of every day and what I'm going to be doing to, work towards success.
Are you the type to color code things?
Sometimes, yeah, I do like to stay very organized, but I also try not to overdo it because, there's a certain point where you're spending too much time
Mm.
putting your calendar together, not getting out there and
Yeah.
getting out
Oh,
of the office. It can be hard to do and it can be very tempting, but um, I think that, there is a flaw in spending too much time on that kind of
yeah.
organization.
The insurance world, because you can serve so many people,
Mhm.
uh, elevator pitches can be difficult to craft because you don't want to ask for everyone, yet it's mostly true. So
Mhm.
how do you go about developing your elevator pitch since you started with Aflac?
Yeah, what I found to be most effective, and it feels almost counterintuitive, but I found the more specific, the better.
Mhm.
And as I've crafted and tested and tried with different pitches and asking, what I asked for in one-to-ones, I found that, I can say, because you're right, I can say I can work with any
Mhm.
business that has three or more employees, that needs benefits, which is, a lot of businesses. And that's too broad of a thing. That's not gonna, if I'm talking to someone or if I'm pitching in BNI, that's not going to spark anything in someone's mind where they think, oh, I know this person that I need to introduce to Bravin. Um, but if I say, introduce me to someone that owns a residential cleaning company
Mhm.
that, has recently said that they're looking to hire, that's a lot more specific. And that is something that has actually gotten me referrals. And but there's even another layer where you can be so specific that I can ask for, hey, I want to meet so and so from this business.
Mhm.
Or one thing I had success with recently is there's a couple businesses I work with that are part of franchises. They're chains, but the locations are locally owned. And I spend a couple weeks doing my pitches and talking in one-to-one, saying, hey, I'm trying to meet one of the other owners of this specific franchise that has locations in the triangle. I work with one of them and I'd like to meet more because, we've had a really successful relationship. And I actually ended up getting a referral from that because someone else knew someone that was buying three or four locations in the triangle. Um, so I found that just being hyper specific is really great. For BNI, it gets you more referrals, and as my role as a mentor, I preach it to everyone because I think it's very important. It's very effective.
Yeah, because in a lot of parts of our life, we'll ask for things. Hey, do you know a good restaurant? Hey, do you know a good movie? Things like that. But,
Hmm.
and I was guilty of this too. But when we get in front of any group, whether it's BNI or not, and it's our turn for an elevator pitch, we just feel like we have to tell. My company does these 17 things most awesomely and blah, blah, blah. And then they sit down, they never asked for anything. So kudos to you. And I
Hmm.
know the members in your chapter, especially working with Mary. I know she's been a big help to your chapter. She's very wise at
Yes.
what she does. Yeah, we got to ask if that's what we want. Just ask. So I'm glad you started
Hmm.
doing that.
Yes.
All right, folks, we've been putting Bravin's phone number up on the screen here. Some things you need an expert to talk to because they know what's working. This is insurance is one of them, especially supplemental type insurances. We don't know what all it covers or how it will help us, but you need to do that. So, Bravin, the people that watch the show and the ones that'll listen later, we
Hmm.
want them to do what? What homework assignment do we want to give them with regard to their overall health insurance policy?
Yeah. I think it's really just make sure you understand what you have. First and foremost, you don't want to be surprised if you really need that policy. Um, so make sure you understand what you have. If you don't understand, like reach out to whoever you work with to get that policy, whatever company, try to find an agent. If you're having trouble getting in touch with an agent and finding that they can't explain or they're not doing a good job or you're not getting the help that you need, it who you work with, the relationship is one of the most important things. I would always recommend try and find someone that can actually help you through this, that will help you learn to understand your policy, and most importantly, should it ever come up and you need to file those claims, will help you file those claims.
Oh,
You don't want to be on your own, and you don't want to be caught by
yeah.
surprise when that happens.
Yeah. And I like what you said at the very beginning of the show, gap insurance. So,
Mhm.
and the more I think about that, is like, okay, if something happens to me, what gaps do I need to fill? And weekly income is the first thing that comes to mind, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you definitely don't want to be caught in a situation where you spent a week in the hospital and rent's coming up, and now you can't pay it because you haven't been at work. That's not a fun
Yep.
situation to be in. And there are a lot of ways with gap insurance and supplemental insurance that you can protect yourself from
Good. All right. So, folks, give Bravin a call. We've been putting his number up there. Please give him a call. Just ask him a question. He'll listen to you. He'll talk with you. Not a problem. I'll speak for him. He'll do that. But just make sure everything is covered. Because and Bravin, I know you'll agree with this. Many of the insurance people I know, some of the best lines I've ever heard from them is most everybody has a policy, but not everybody has coverage.
that. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. And so make sure you have coverage for everything that's going to go on in your life to the best of your knowledge and one less thing to worry about. So, anyways, Bravin, glad to have you on the show today. A lot of fun, good knowledge for us. And we'll be speaking again because I'll need an update every now and then on what 2 years looks like and 3 years looks like and just see how
Hmm.
you're doing in the market. So, real quick, are you licensed in any other states and do you have to be licensed?
I am. I'm licensed in a bunch of other states,
Okay.
and I have gotten referrals and work with clients in other states that have employees in other states. And for almost every state, there's a few that I can't, but almost every state I can get my license, pretty easily to work with people in that state.
All right, folks, you got family members and friends in another state. Here's one. Here's a Christmas present you can give to them is a connection to Bravin to make sure they're covered on that. So, anyways, Bravin, thanks for being on the show today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Mike.
And we'll see everybody next time on Capital to the Coast BNI.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by StreamingGear.com and DeltaForce.net.